The town drunk had made her his punching bag. The cowboy threw him in the river and took her home. The sun rose slowly over the small town of Willow Creek, spilling its golden light over dusty streets and weathered wooden buildings. The morning air was warm, carrying the smell of fresh bread from the bakery and the faint scent of hay from the nearby stables. People began to stir, opening shutters and stepping onto porches, greeting neighbors with nods and soft hellos. Life in Willow Creek moved at a steady, predictable pace, a rhythm that the townsfolk found comforting. But for some, that rhythm was more of a cage than a comfort. Clara moved carefully along the boardwalk, her worn boots making soft clinks against the wooden planks. She carried a basket of eggs from the chickens in her small yard, the corners of her faded shawl brushing against her arms as she balanced the fragile contents. Her eyes scanned the street as she walked, watching for familiar faces. Some nodded politely, but most kept their distance, eyes darting away when hers met theirs. Clara had grown used to this. In Willow Creek, everyone knew everyone else's business, yet few dared to intervene when trouble arose. Her home was a modest wooden house at the edge of town, just beyond the last shop and before the wide fields of golden wheat. The roof had missing shingles, and the paint on the walls peeled under the harsh sun. But Clara had done her best to keep the garden tidy, planting small rows of vegetables and flowers that brightened the place. Morning sunlight caught on the petals of the marigolds, making them glow like little lanterns along the fence. She paused for a moment to straighten them, smoothing the leaves with gentle hands. These small acts of care were her way of holding on to hope, a quiet rebellion against the hardships she faced. Her husband, Eli, was already awake when she returned. He was sitting on the porch in a rickety chair, a mug of coffee in one hand and a distant look in his eyes. The sun highlighted the lines on his face, the kind that come not from age but from years of worry and disappointment. Clara's stomach tightened. Eli had changed over the years. Once he had been full of laughter and warmth, a man who could make her smile with a simple story or a playful joke. But now the spark was gone. In its place was a shadow, one that darkened the corners of their small home and her life. Clara set the basket down carefully on the table and avoided looking directly at him. She moved silently to the kitchen, hoping to avoid conversation until he was more himself. But Eli's voice, rough and uneven, called after her. "Where were you so early?" he asked. His words were not angry, not yet, but they carried a sharp edge that made Clara flinch. "I was feeding the chickens and collecting eggs," she replied softly, keeping her voice steady. "The bakery hasn't opened yet, so I thought I'd do it before the day gets busy." He grunted in acknowledgement, turning his attention back to the street. Clara exhaled quietly, letting the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. She moved to the sink to wash the basket, letting the cool water run over her hands. Each splash of water was like a small comfort, a reminder that some things in life were simple and kind, even if others were not. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Clara prepared bread and butter, pouring a cup of coffee for Eli without looking directly at him. She had learned that morning conversations were safest when they were brief and neutral. Any mention of money, the town, or their future could ignite a spark of frustration that she had no desire to face before the day had truly begun. Instead, they ate in silence, the only sounds the scrape of utensils against plates and the occasional chirp of birds outside the window. After breakfast, Clara stepped outside again, her apron tied neatly around her waist, to tend to the garden. She knelt in the soft soil, pulling weeds and checking the progress of the vegetables. Each plant that thrived under her care gave her a small sense of control, a way to nurture life even when so much around her felt uncertain. She thought about the town beyond her fence, the dusty streets, and the people who moved through them like shadows. Life in Willow Creek was simple, predictable, and sometimes kind, but it was also full of quiet judgment, small cruelties, and hidden struggles. Eli came outside at mid-morning, leaning on the railing of the porch. He had a newspaper in hand, reading the headlines with furrowed brows. Clara avoided him, returning to her garden work, but she could feel his eyes on her. He said nothing, yet the weight of his gaze was enough to make her heart race. Over the years, she had learned to read him like a weather vane, noticing the slight twitch of his jaw or the way he gripped his mug when something annoyed him. These small signals were enough to tell her when the day would pass quietly and when it might bring another storm. By late morning, the town's main street was alive with activity. Children ran between the shop fronts, laughing and shouting, while merchants called out prices and deals from their wooden stalls. The smell of fresh bread mingled with the earthy scent of leather from the saddlery and the faint aroma of coffee from the cafe. Clara watched from her garden, her hands still busy in the soil, feeling a mixture of longing and apprehension. She wanted to walk among the townsfolk to feel part of their world, but she knew she had to be cautious. Her life had become one of observation rather than participation, learning to measure her steps carefully and to keep her voice soft. Eli came down from the porch suddenly, holding a bottle of water in one hand. He walked toward her, his steps heavy, and Clara straightened instinctively. He said nothing at first, just stared at her with eyes that once held love but now often carried frustration. Clara could feel a tight knot in her stomach, a familiar tension she had learned to live with. She kept her hands busy, pretending to inspect a row of carrots as he approached. "Don't forget the market today," he said finally, his voice low and slightly uneven. "You'll need to sell some of those vegetables, make sure they're good. People notice if your produce isn't perfect." Clara nodded quickly. "Yes, Eli, I'll make sure they're ready." She spoke softly, careful not to give him a reason to raise his voice further. He turned and walked back toward the porch, leaving Clara to her work. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. These moments of quiet were rare, but they were enough to remind her that she could survive another day. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Clara finished her work in the garden and prepared the vegetables for the market. She washed the carrots, tied them in neat bundles, and arranged the lettuce and tomatoes in baskets. Each task, each careful arrangement, was an act of preparation not just for the market, but for the delicate balance of her life. She had learned that small, careful actions could help her navigate the uncertainty around her. Clara walked to the market with her baskets balanced on a wooden cart. The streets were crowded, but she moved carefully, weaving between townsfolk and vendors with practiced ease. Some smiled politely, nodding as she passed. Others avoided her gaze, their expressions neutral. She had long since stopped expecting anyone to intervene or offer comfort. Willow Creek was a town of observation, where everyone watched quietly and few acted. At the market, she found her usual spot under the shade of a large elm tree. She arranged the vegetables neatly, hoping that the bright colors and fresh appearance would attract buyers. As people began to browse, she greeted them with soft smiles and polite words. Selling produce was a small comfort, a way to feel useful and to maintain some connection to the town. She took pride in the freshness of her vegetables, the crispness of the carrots, and the shine of the tomatoes. The morning passed slowly, with townsfolk buying what they needed and children playing nearby. Clara remained vigilant, her mind never fully at ease. She thought about Eli, about the weight of his expectations and the quiet tension that followed him wherever he went. She had grown accustomed to managing her life around his moods, learning to anticipate frustration and to act cautiously. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant attention and emotional strength. By mid-afternoon, Clara began to pack up the unsold vegetables. She felt a small sense of relief as the market quieted down and the crowds dispersed. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. She walked back toward home, her steps measured and careful. Each day followed a similar pattern: work in the morning, market in the afternoon, and then the slow return home, where tension awaited. When she reached her small house at the edge of town, she paused to look at the fields beyond. The golden wheat swayed gently in the breeze, and the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. Clara allowed herself a moment of quiet appreciation, a small reminder that there was beauty in the world despite the difficulties she faced. She carried the baskets inside and began preparing for the evening, moving with careful precision as she set the table and tidied the kitchen. As night fell, Clara sat quietly by the window, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The town was calm now, the streets empty, and the air filled with the soft sounds of nighttime. She thought about the day that had passed, about the small victories and quiet moments of relief. Despite the challenges and the constant tension, Clara felt a small spark of hope. She had survived another day, had maintained her dignity, and had found moments of beauty in the ordinary. Life in Willow Creek was far from easy, but Clara had learned the power of patience, observation, and quiet courage. She knew that tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own tensions, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. As she closed her eyes and listened to the night, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her days might be brighter, where her life might hold more than quiet survival. For now, she held onto that hope, small and fragile, like the first bloom of a flower in her garden. The sun had climbed high in the sky when a new figure appeared on the horizon. Dust swirled around the tall man on horseback as he rode slowly along the main street of Willow Creek. His hat shaded his eyes, but the townsfolk could see the quiet confidence in his posture. He moved with a steady grace, the kind that came from years of working with horses and living under the open sky. People paused to watch him pass, some tipping their hats, others whispering among themselves. There was something different about this man, someone who seemed not part of the usual rhythm of the town, yet not a stranger either. The man dismounted in front of the small general store and tied his horse to the post. He brushed off his coat, his boots kicking up small puffs of dust. His name was Jake, a cowboy who had traveled many miles across plains, rivers, and forests. He carried with him a reputation not for troublemaking, but for fairness, honesty, and a quiet sense of justice. He preferred to solve problems with reason rather than anger, yet people knew that when action was necessary, he would not hesitate. Jake walked into the store, nodding politely at the shopkeeper and glancing at the rows of goods neatly arranged on the shelves. He bought some supplies, coffee, a loaf of bread, and a few items for his horse, and stepped back into the sunlight. As he walked toward the edge of town, his eyes fell upon a familiar scene. A woman moving carefully along the street, her head slightly bowed, carrying baskets as if each step required careful calculation. Her hands were busy, yet her movements had a quiet elegance, a grace that spoke of resilience and patience. It was Clara. She did not notice him at first, lost in her own thoughts and the weight of her day. But Jake could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she avoided others, and the faint lines of worry etched on her face. Something about her struck him, not her beauty alone, though she had that, but the way she carried herself under the heavy burden of her life. There was strength hidden in her careful movements, a quiet determination that piqued his curiosity. As Clara moved past the general store, Jake followed at a respectful distance. He observed without intruding, watching her interactions with the townsfolk, noticing the polite smiles, the quick steps, and the subtle signs of caution she displayed. It was clear she was familiar with hardship, yet she carried herself with dignity. He had seen many people struggle in his travels, but few carried their burdens with such quiet perseverance. Meanwhile, Eli, her husband, had finished his coffee and stepped outside, scanning the street with a restless gaze. He noticed Clara as she passed, carrying her baskets, and something in his expression shifted. It was not just annoyance. It was frustration mixed with a sense of jealousy, a feeling that she was slipping beyond his control even in small ways. He muttered under his breath, a faint sound that carried across the street. Clara did not hear him, but Jake did. His eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the tension in the scene before him. Clara approached the market to set up her small stall. She arranged her vegetables carefully, hoping to catch the attention of buyers. Her hands moved with practiced ease, tying bundles of carrots and placing tomatoes in neat rows. Jake lingered nearby, pretending to adjust his supplies, yet he watched her closely. He noticed the small gestures, the way her fingers brushed over the fresh leaves, and the way she straightened her back as if bracing against some invisible weight. The morning passed quietly, though the tension in the air grew slowly. Eli had followed Clara from a distance, muttering under his breath and occasionally shaking his head. He did not interfere directly, but his presence was enough to make her cautious. Every time she looked up from her work, she felt the weight of his gaze, and her movements became even more careful. Jake, sensing the unease, decided it was time to act, though he did not yet know what form that action would take. A young boy ran past the market stall, laughing as he chased a stray chicken. Clara smiled faintly at the sound, a small release of the tension she had carried all morning. Jake took a step forward, finally breaking the distance between them. "Good morning," he said, tipping his hat politely. His voice was calm and steady, with a warmth that seemed to carry across the space between them. Clara glanced up, startled for a moment before offering a hesitant smile. "Good morning," she replied softly, her voice barely above the hum of the bustling market. "I don't mean to intrude," Jake continued, "but I couldn't help noticing you seem tense. Is everything all right?" Clara hesitated. She had learned to keep her problems private, not trusting strangers with her burdens. But something about Jake's presence was different. He did not carry judgment or suspicion. His eyes held only quiet concern. She nodded slowly, keeping her voice measured. "I'm fine," she said, "just busy with the market." Jake nodded, understanding without pressing further. He moved a few steps closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "Well, if you need any help, I'm nearby. My name is Jake." Clara gave a faint smile, appreciating the offer but unsure if she could accept it. "Clara," she said simply. Just then, Eli appeared, stepping into the open space near the market. His expression was dark, a mixture of frustration and suspicion. He looked at Jake, then at Clara, and muttered something under his breath that no one else could hear. Clara felt a pang of anxiety, the familiar knot tightening in her stomach. She glanced at Jake, hoping he would understand the tension without needing explanation. Jake did understand. He could feel the unease radiating from her, the weight of a situation that had grown too heavy for one person to carry alone. He took a step toward Eli, his posture calm but firm. "Is everything all right?" he asked. His voice carried authority without aggression, a clear signal that he would not allow the situation to escalate unnecessarily. Eli looked at him, surprise flickering in his eyes. He had not expected anyone to intervene, least of all a stranger. His lips tightened, and for a moment there was a silent standoff. Clara watched, holding her breath, unsure what would happen next. Jake continued, keeping his voice even. "You don't need to carry your frustrations here in the market. Everyone is busy trying to live their lives." Eli's shoulders slumped slightly, caught between pride and awareness that he had been noticed. He muttered something inaudible, then turned and walked away, disappearing down a side street. Clara exhaled slowly, relief washing over her in gentle waves. Jake watched her, sensing the subtle release of tension, yet knowing that trust was something earned, not given freely. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, her voice steady but soft. I appreciate you stepping in." Jake nodded, tipping his hat again. "Sometimes everyone needs a hand," he said simply, "especially in a town where life can be hard and people don't always notice what's happening behind closed doors." They spent the rest of the morning in quiet conversation. Jake asked about her vegetables, the market, and the town, keeping the tone light and friendly. Clara found herself relaxing slightly, her cautious smile returning as she shared small details of her life. For the first time in a long while, she felt someone was truly listening, someone who cared about her well-being without expecting anything in return. As the sun climbed higher, Jake offered to help carry some of the heavier baskets back toward her home. Clara hesitated, then accepted, realizing that his presence was safe and steady. Together, they walked along the dusty streets, the baskets balanced carefully, the conversation flowing in gentle, easy patterns. It was a simple act, but it carried a weight far beyond the physical task, a sense of support, of partnership, and of trust beginning to grow. By the time they reached the edge of town, the fields stretching out like golden waves in the sunlight, Clara felt a small but meaningful shift within her. She had survived the tension of the morning, and with Jake's quiet support, she had taken a step toward reclaiming a sense of calm in her life. Jake looked at her, his eyes warm and steady. "You don't have to face everything alone," he said. "Sometimes even the smallest help can make a difference." Clara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had been carrying the weight of her worries alone for too long. In Jake's presence, she realized that it was possible to share that weight, even just a little, and feel the relief that came with it. As they parted that afternoon, Jake promised to check on her again, and Clara found herself feeling a sense of anticipation rather than fear. For the first time in many months, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she did not have to face every challenge alone. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara stood on her porch, watching the fields sway gently in the evening breeze. She felt a quiet sense of gratitude for the unexpected presence of someone who had noticed her struggle and offered support. It was a small but powerful reminder that even in the midst of difficulty, human kindness could appear when least expected. The day ended with a soft calm settling over Willow Creek, the town quiet and peaceful under the warm glow of twilight. Clara prepared for the evening with a lighter heart, carrying baskets inside, tending to the garden, and letting herself breathe a little easier than she had in months. She knew challenges would continue, that life in the town was not always fair or kind. But she also knew that she had witnessed something important that day: courage, patience, and the simple act of noticing someone who needed help. And with that knowledge came hope, a feeling that perhaps the future could hold more light than she had dared to imagine. The evening air was soft and warm as Clara followed Jake out of the market and toward the edge of town. The streets were quiet now, the sun dipping low behind the hills and painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The warmth of the day lingered on the wooden boardwalks and in the fields beyond, making everything look calm, peaceful, and almost gentle. For Clara, the world had felt heavy and tense for so long that this sudden quiet was almost unfamiliar. She walked carefully, her steps slow and deliberate, her mind filled with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Jake led her along a dirt path that wound through fields of wheat and wildflowers. The smell of fresh grass and earth filled the air, and the gentle sound of birds calling to each other carried across the open space. It was a place far removed from the dusty streets and crowded markets of Willow Creek, a place where the world seemed bigger, freer, and kinder. Clara's heart felt lighter with every step, even though she was still unsure of what lay ahead. Her home on the edge of town had been small, familiar, and full of routines, but Jake's place was different. As they approached, she saw a modest house tucked between a small grove of trees and an open pasture. The roof was sturdy, and the windows glimmered with the last light of the day. A wooden fence surrounded the yard, enclosing a small garden that looked well cared for. A few horses grazed nearby, their soft movements and gentle sounds creating a sense of calm that Clara had not felt in months. Jake opened the gate and gestured for Clara to step inside. "Make yourself comfortable," he said kindly, his voice calm and reassuring. "You don't have to worry here." Clara hesitated for a moment. She had spent so long living with caution, with a sense of constant awareness of what might go wrong, that trusting anyone, even someone as kind as Jake, was difficult. But something in his presence, the way he stood patiently and waited, gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. She took a slow step forward, then another, until she was inside the small yard, feeling the soft earth beneath her feet. The house itself was simple but inviting. Wooden beams held up the roof, and a soft light glowed from inside, hinting at warmth and comfort. Clara noticed a few personal touches: a vase of wildflowers on the windowsill, a neatly stacked pile of firewood, and a small collection of books arranged on a shelf. It was clear that Jake cared for this place, that he had built it not just as a shelter but as a home. The thought made Clara feel a small flicker of hope. Perhaps a home could be more than just a place to live. It could be a place to feel safe, even happy. Jake led her to a chair near the window and gestured for her to sit. "I'll get some water and bread," he said. "You must be tired after the day you've had." Clara nodded quietly, watching as he moved around the kitchen with calm efficiency. The sound of his footsteps on the wooden floor, the gentle clink of dishes, and the soft hum of the wind outside created an atmosphere that was soothing and steady. For the first time in what felt like a long while, Clara allowed herself to relax a little, taking in the sense of normalcy and care. When Jake returned with a small plate of bread and a glass of water, he placed them gently on the table before her. "Here," he said softly. "Eat a little, you need your strength." Clara looked down at the simple meal, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't recognized before. She nodded and took a small bite, savoring the bread and the fresh taste of water. It was such a simple thing, yet it felt like an act of kindness too rare in her daily life to be overlooked. They ate in quiet companionship, the kind that does not require words to be understood. Clara noticed the way Jake moved, the calm and steady rhythm of his actions, and she felt a sense of reassurance. This man, who had appeared so suddenly in her life, seemed to offer something she had long forgotten: patience, care, and understanding without expectation. After the meal, Jake gestured toward the small living area. "You can sit here if you like," he said. "The sun is setting. It's a good time to rest and watch the colors change." Clara walked slowly to the window, looking out over the fields. The sky was painted in brilliant hues of orange, pink, and purple, and the soft rustling of the wheat in the evening breeze created a feeling of serenity she had rarely known. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, and for the first time in many months felt a sense of peace. Jake stood nearby, watching her with gentle attentiveness. He didn't rush her to talk or to explain herself. He simply allowed her the space to feel safe. After a few moments of silence, he spoke softly. It's all right to rest here. No one can hurt you here, not today, not ever while you're with me. Clara turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. She had heard words like that before, but in her experience, promises often came with conditions or they were quickly broken. Yet in Jake's calm and steady presence, she felt something different, something true. "Thank you," she said quietly. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel safe here." Jake smiled faintly, a warmth in his eyes. "That's all I want, for you to feel safe. We'll take things one step at a time." They spent the evening talking quietly, sharing stories in a gentle and careful way. Clara spoke of her life in Willow Creek, of the small joys she had discovered in tending to her garden and selling her vegetables at the market. She spoke of her fears and frustrations, of the loneliness that often filled her days. Jake listened without interrupting, asking gentle questions and offering understanding where he could. He shared stories of his own travels, of the wide open plains and the sunsets he had seen in distant places. His words painted pictures in Clara's mind, images of vast skies, gentle rivers, and open fields. She felt as if she had stepped into another world, one that was bigger, brighter, and full of possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. As the evening grew darker, Jake offered Clara a simple place to rest. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "There's a small room upstairs. It's quiet and comfortable." Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The thought of sleeping somewhere safe, without fear, without tension, felt like a small miracle. She followed him upstairs, taking in the simple but clean and welcoming room. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn to let in the soft glow of the moonlight. Clara felt a sense of calm wash over her, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Before she lay down, Jake handed her a small lantern. "Just in case you wake up in the middle of the night," he said. "You won't be alone." Clara smiled faintly, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she whispered. As she lay down, she thought about the day, the market, Eli, the tension she had carried, and now this quiet, safe place. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where kindness could exist, where someone could truly care for her well-being without expecting anything in return. Jake returned downstairs, moving quietly as he tended to the horses and prepared for the night. Clara listened from her room, feeling the gentle sounds of life continue around her. The night was calm, filled with the soft whispers of the wind and the occasional call of an owl. She closed her eyes, letting herself rest, feeling the tension of the day melt away. The next morning, Clara awoke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The soft morning light spilled into the room, warming her face. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of renewal she hadn't felt in months. Downstairs, Jake was preparing breakfast, the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. "You're awake," he said quietly, smiling as she entered the kitchen. "Good morning. I made some breakfast. Hope you like eggs and toast." Clara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. "It smells wonderful," she said softly. They ate together in quiet companionship, sharing stories and laughter over the simple meal. Clara began to feel a sense of connection, a sense that she could trust Jake and that she did not have to carry the weight of her worries alone. It was a new feeling, one that filled her with hope and courage. After breakfast, Jake offered to show her the land around his home. They walked through the fields, the golden wheat swaying gently in the breeze, and Clara felt a sense of freedom she had not known for a long time. They talked about the plants, the animals, and the beauty of the open sky. Clara found herself smiling freely, laughing at the small jokes Jake made, and feeling a joy she had long forgotten. By the time the sun reached its peak, Clara felt stronger, lighter, and more confident. She had been given a gift more valuable than anything she had known, the gift of safety, trust, and the possibility of a life with hope. The morning air was crisp and fresh as Clara stepped outside, stretching her arms toward the bright sky. The soft sunlight glimmered across the fields, casting a warm, golden glow over the tall grasses and wildflowers. For the first time in what felt like years, Clara felt a sense of freedom as she breathed in the fresh air. The weight that had pressed on her chest for so long, the worries, the fear, the quiet sadness, seemed to lift a little with each passing moment. She looked around, taking in the wide-open space, the gentle sway of the wheat, and the quiet hum of life all around her. Jake was already busy in the yard, tending to the horses and checking the fences. He noticed Clara watching him from a distance and waved with a small smile. "Morning," he called out. "Hope you slept well." Clara smiled back, her lips curving naturally for the first time in weeks. "I did, thank you," she replied softly. "It's peaceful here." Jake nodded, glancing around the property. "It is, that's why I like it. It's calm and you can hear yourself think." Clara walked over to him, carrying a basket of fresh eggs she had gathered from the small coop near the house. She moved with ease now, no longer tense or cautious, her steps lighter than they had been in months. Jake noticed the change immediately, the small adjustments in her posture, the gentle confidence in her movements, and he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had known that Clara was strong, but seeing her begin to reclaim that strength was inspiring. They spent the morning working together around the property. Clara learned how to care for the horses, checking their coats, brushing their manes, and making sure they had clean water. Jake taught her patiently, explaining each step and demonstrating techniques with a calm and gentle approach. At first, Clara's hands trembled with uncertainty, but soon she found a rhythm, her movements becoming smooth and confident. "See," Jake said with a smile. "You're a natural. These animals respond well to kindness and patience, and you have both in plenty." Clara laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign to her own ears but comforting at the same time. "I guess I just needed someone to show me how," she replied. Jake shook his head. "No, you had it in you all along. Sometimes we just need a safe place to discover it again." As the day progressed, Clara and Jake worked side by side, planting new vegetables in the garden, repairing fences, and checking on the small orchard near the edge of the property. The work was steady and purposeful, giving Clara a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in a long time. Each task, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming her life, toward proving to herself that she could care for something and nurture it successfully. By afternoon, they paused under the shade of a large oak tree, sitting on a simple bench Jake had built. The warm breeze rustled the leaves above them, and the sound of birdsong filled the quiet air. Jake handed Clara a cup of tea, and she took it gratefully, savoring the warmth and comfort it offered. "You've done well today," Jake said gently. "I can see the difference in you already. You're more confident, more at ease. It's wonderful to watch." Clara blushed slightly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. I feel different," she admitted. "Like I'm starting to remember who I am, not just who I've been forced to be." Jake nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "That's the best part of life," he said softly. "Sometimes we forget ourselves in the struggles we face, but with time, patience, and the right support, we can find our way back." They sat together in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunlight dance across the fields. Clara felt a sense of peace settle in her chest, a calm she had not known in a long time. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled not with fear or worry, but with hope and possibility. As the days passed, Clara continued to grow stronger. She learned new skills around the property, from mending fences to caring for the orchard, and she found joy in the small routines of daily life. She discovered that she could work hard, solve problems, and make decisions on her own. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, built her confidence and sense of independence. Jake remained a steady presence, offering guidance and support without ever pressing her to do more than she was comfortable with. He never judged her for her past, never questioned her choices, and never demanded anything in return. Instead, he celebrated her successes, encouraged her when she doubted herself, and created a safe environment where she could flourish. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara and Jake sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of pink and gold. Clara felt a sense of gratitude swell in her chest, a feeling she had not known she could experience so fully. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Like I have control over my life, like I can actually plan for the future instead of just surviving day to day." Jake smiled, his gaze steady and kind. "You've earned it," he replied. "All of this, the work, the patience, the courage you've shown, it's yours. You've rebuilt yourself piece by piece, and you deserve every bit of this peace." Clara nodded, letting the warmth of his words sink in. She realized that the future no longer felt uncertain or frightening. She had found not only safety and support, but also the strength within herself to face life with confidence and hope. Over the following weeks, Clara became more active in the community, visiting the town with a new sense of purpose. She interacted with neighbors, sold vegetables at the market, and even began helping with small projects around town. Her presence was noticed, and the townspeople began to respect her quiet strength and determination. She no longer felt like a shadow moving through the streets, unseen and overlooked. Instead, she walked with confidence, her head held high, and her eyes open to the possibilities around her. Eli never returned to disrupt her life. Rumors circulated that he had left town, though no one knew exactly where. Clara did not dwell on it, for she had moved beyond the fear and uncertainty he had once brought into her life. She focused instead on the present, on the tangible progress she had made, and on the hope that each day could bring something positive and fulfilling. Jake continued to support her, but their relationship evolved naturally. It was built on trust, respect, and shared experiences, rather than urgency or expectation. They laughed together, worked together, and celebrated the small victories of daily life. Clara found herself enjoying the simple moments, the taste of fresh bread, the feel of warm sunlight on her face, the satisfaction of completing a task well done. Each day was a reminder that life could be kind, that people could care, and that even after hardship, joy was possible. One bright morning, Clara stood in the garden, tending to the rows of vegetables that now flourished under her care. Jake walked up beside her carrying a basket of freshly picked apples. He offered her one, and she took it with a smile, feeling the crisp sweetness as she bit into it. "You've done an amazing job here," Jake said, his voice warm. "This place feels alive with your care and energy." Clara looked around, seeing the flourishing garden, the healthy animals, and the sense of life and hope in every corner of the property. She realized how far she had come, from a life of fear and uncertainty to one filled with confidence, accomplishment, and possibility. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted softly. "You've given me the chance to find myself again, to trust, and to live fully." Jake shook his head gently. "No, Clara, you did this. I only offered a safe place and a helping hand. The courage, patience, and determination came from you." Clara felt a swell of pride and gratitude. She realized that her strength had always been within her, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. She had survived hardship, embraced patience, and worked diligently to reclaim her life. Now, with support and trust, she could face the future with confidence. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. The past, with its hardships and challenges, was behind her. The present was full of opportunity, and the future held promise and hope. She knew that life would not always be easy, but she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and support to face whatever came her way. That evening, Clara and Jake sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The quiet sounds of the night, rustling leaves, distant animals, and the soft hum of the wind filled the air. Clara felt a sense of completion, a sense that she had reclaimed her life and her spirit. She had learned the power of patience, courage, and trust, and she had discovered that kindness and support could change everything. She looked at Jake, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. Jake smiled, his expression gentle. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "You've done the hard work. I just helped you see what you were capable of all along." Clara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream. Not of escape, not of safety alone, but of a life filled with hope, possibility, and joy. As the stars twinkled above Willow Creek, Clara knew that she had not only survived her past, but had also grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She had discovered the power of trust, the beauty of companionship, and the strength within herself. And with that knowledge, she felt ready to embrace the future, whatever it might bring.